webinar launching Racial Equity Learning Lab. But before we dive into this time together, I wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that we all arrive in this space on the shoulders of our ancestors who have lifted us and allowed us to arrive in this space. I wanted to acknowledge that we live and work on stolen land, that there are 574 recognized tribal nations in the US, and countless more not counted on this list. We recognize that Indigenous peoples are very much with us today and are here with us and paying the ultimate sacrifice to survive. I'm tuning in from the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi people, now known as Chicago, and encourage you all to do your research, as I know many of you already have, by visiting www.native-land.ca to identify your native land and commit to your acknowledgement and actions, such as taking the time to learn more about the history of Indigenous people in your land and in finding your own commitment. At NFSN, we strive to understand all of our partners as unique people representing unique communities, and we're glad to have you here today as your whole selves. So if you're able, please share I invite you now to please share your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, and your organizational affiliation, if any, in the chat. Let's see, get those rolling in. Name, pronouns, and organization, if any. All right. Thank you for letting those roll in. And at this time, I would also like to take a few moments to introduce the NFSN team who's in the room today. So if you have your camera on, please wave. I see Tomas Delgado, Program Manager, Ji-Yoon Chan, Comms Manager. We also have our Equity Consultant who will be co-presenting with me today, Elena Paisano. And I believe I saw our co-executive directors join in, Miguel Villarreal and Jessica Goodmanson. Please wave if you have your video on. I unfortunately can't see everyone. There's a lot of folks in the room, which is really exciting. All right. And I am so honored and humbled to also introduce you all to our Lab Advisory Council members, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know and collaborating with in preparation for the Racial Equity Learning Lab. I will start with Josh Yuen Shat, if you can wave, Tina Wong, Youssef Bouzayan, Tess Traves, and Jamise Quelle. I'm not sure, I hope she was able to join. Is Jamise Quelle here yet?
I'm here. I've been here since the beginning.
Oh, awesome. And Mark Becker, who's not able to join us today, but I wanted to make sure to take the time to credit his participation in the Lab Advisory Council. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Keep those introductions flowing in the chat. We'd love to see who's in the room. Let's see. Can you all see my screen? Awesome, thank you. I have so many screens up. Okay, again, well, thank you all so much for joining us. We have a packed agenda here for you, highlighting not only the collaborative design of the Racial Equity Learning Lab, but also tell you about how you can join this first cohort of 13, or simply stay involved if you would like to. And you'll hear about the essence of co-creation and co-learning of the Racial Equity Learning Lab from Elena Paisano later today. But before that, I wanted to take some time to get to know who's in the room as well. This is going to be the point in our time together where we get to see who's in the room. So if you could please, we'll have two activities for you all. So we're going to start with the Mentimeter and then a quick Zoom poll afterwards. So if you can go to www.menti.com and use the code that's in front of you, 39239634, or take a picture of the QR code. Please name a community that you are representing in this space today. And we want to make sure we hold them dear to us and keep them in mind as we continue our gathering here together. And I believe Ji-yoon can also drop the link in the chat to join. Get those going in. So name a community that you're representing in this space today. It could be a location, belief, values, your work in the food system, your ancestors. Love it. This is amazing. This is my favorite part of the word cloud. Please keep those going, and I will be sharing the final image, the final word cloud with you all as follow-up to this call. I'm seeing students, women, youth, BIPOC, farmers, USDA, underserved. Thank you. And now we're also a little bit curious about the role that some of you are, some of the roles that you have in the Farm to School movement. So I'm going to invite Elena to please release the Zoom poll. Just wanted to get a sense of your role and what you're kind of playing in the Farm to School movement. Elena. I don't see Elena.
I'm here.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Elena, I'm not seeing the Zoom poll. Have you
Oh,
released?
you don't see the Zoom poll. Oh,
Yeah,
no.
darn.
It's a mystery. I can tell you. Thank you all for participating. It looks like we primarily have a lot of our state agency partners here at the table, both federal and state. A lot of the Farm to School coordinator community. Thank you for being here. The nonprofit sector, as well as direct school district members, and then our growers and farmers, and a couple distributors in the room here helping to make those food connections.
Awesome. Thank you. Elena, if you could take a picture of that so I get to see.
I will happily.
Zoom has been a mystery to us this afternoon, but we all know the game. Thank you for your grace and patience. All right. So as you know, the National Farm to School Network has a call to action of 100% of communities will hold power in a racially just food system. We'd like to share with you all our positionality in this work and acknowledge that our power as a national organization and positionality as stewards of the lab, of the Racial Equity Learning Lab, with the desire to work alongside cohort members in imagining and transforming a system that works towards a racially just food system. NFSN, despite serving the role of the convener of this cohort for the Racial Equity Learning Lab, is not claiming to be an authority on equity, but a co-participant in this space, and understands that we all have a part in this play. NFSN intends to uplift the concept of cultural humility, which is the dynamic and lifelong process of focusing on self-reflection, personal critique, and acknowledging of biases. Cultural humility underpins the importance of building genuine connection and developing group trust. And I'll pass it on to my colleague Tomas to just guide us a little bit about what our plan is for today. And we'll continue to gather here together. Tomas?
Thanks, Trisha. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tomas Delgado, Program Manager with National Farm to School Network, and coming to you from Central Illinois. Just going to give you a quick overview of what our agenda is today, touching on just some of the areas that we'll be focusing on and the ways in which you all can stay connected and involved in our work. We're going to begin today's meeting with a remark from the USDA, a welcoming remark, and then we'll lead into hearing about the actual concepts and background of the Racial Equity Learning Lab from our equity consultant, Elena Paisano, and our project lead, Trisha Bautista. This will then lead us into a summary of the Learning Lab collaborative design process. So you'll be able to hear from our advisory council, which will then lead us into just a summary on the application process for the cohort and then the project and program timeline. Of course, we'll be sharing ways in which you all can stay connected and involved in this work if you choose not to apply. And then at the end of our session today at around 4:15 Eastern time, we'll conclude the session, but you'll have the option to stay with us for an optional breakout Q&A where you'll be able to actually connect with us on one-on-one questions and have some of your questions answered in that capacity. If you do have burning questions, go ahead and share them through the chat, but try and reserve majority of your discussion points and questions for the Q&A session. On that note, I'm going to pass it to our USDA colleague and speaker, Dr. Carrie Cotright, and take it away, Carrie.
All right, trying to get off mute there. Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for having us here today. Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, Tomas. And thank you for this invitation for USDA to bring the welcome for today. Good afternoon to everyone. I am so excited to join you today as we introduce the Racial Equity Learning Lab. I have had the privilege of recently serving on the National Farm to School to Network Advisory Board, and NFSE members are some of the most genuine and passionate people that I know. So I want to say a special hello to Miguel and others who I've had the pleasure of working with. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. I have an extensive background in working with a variety of farm to early care and education programs at the University of Georgia. And I am currently on leave from there as an associate professor, serving in the role as the Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity at USDA in the Food and Nutrition Service. I adore Farm to School, and we actually have a very strong and dedicated network right here in my home state of Georgia. I'm also thrilled to be in this position at USDA to think about how we can elevate the Farm to School movement and its impact on nutrition security. So first, I want to challenge all of you to work with me to do more both individually and collectively to end hunger, to improve nutrition and physical activity, and to reduce diet-related diseases and disparities. These are the goals of the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. This historic event, which was held last September, is catalyzing the public and private sector to work together to accelerate progress and drive transformative change in the U.S. around nutrition security. This past September, Dr. Sarah Blige, our previous Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity, provided an overview of our food and nutrition security initiative at the annual Patrick Leahy Farm to School Programs Grantee Gathering, which some of you may have attended. So today, I want to focus on introducing myself and giving you a taste of my vision to leverage this outstanding network. Similar to our first director, Dr. Sarah Blige, I will be leading a whole-of-department approach to the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack's core priority to tackle food and nutrition insecurity. And I will also serve as one of 2 points of contact on the Biden-Harris administration White House Domestic Policy Council Nutrition Interagency Policy Committee. This committee leads a whole-of-government approach to leveraging the momentum of the historic White House Conference, implementing the national strategy, and helping to secure conference commitments outside of the government. All of this work aims to accelerate the progress on the White House goals, and we need your help both individually and collectively. Before we start to think big and bold together, I want to start by sharing a little bit about myself and why this work is so important to me. I'm an Atlanta native, and as I mentioned, I'm coming to you from the University of Georgia, where I'm on leave from my position being an associate professor in the Department of Nutritional Sciences. I'm also a community engaged researcher and registered dietitian. And as I mentioned, I love Farm to ECE. My previous federal experience includes being an Oak Ridge Institute Science and Education, or ORISE Fellow at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where I had the wonderful opportunity to work closely on the Let's Move Child Care initiative. My research, teaching, and community engagement focuses on using innovative approaches for early childhood obesity prevention, including Farm to ECE. I don't have to tell this group the amazing impacts that it has on children, families, and their communities. Growing healthy food and helping to develop healthy children is near and dear to my heart, because I am blessed to have 3 little girls who are ages 5, 7, and 9. So in this lovely picture here, you see my research assistant, my former research assistant, Natalie, dressed as Miss Carrot, our little friend Grayson here, and my eldest daughter, Kamara, when she was about 4 years old. And we were in a field taking pictures, promoting fruits and vegetables. And in my research, I used theater, nutrition, dance, and music and the arts to teach kids about nutrition. Hence, Miss Carrot here, who is featured in the picture. At my house, my girls love cooking food, growing veggies in our garden, and singing songs like the broccoli song, which you can hear me sing in my TED Talk. I won't sing it right now. But a great deal of my work has focused on promoting USDA programs such as SNAP-Ed and CACFP. These programs have critical public health impacts, and we have such an incredible opportunity to make them even better right now. Much research, including my own, has shown that CACFP participation improves the quality of food and beverages of children while they are in care. And I can also tell you many stories about my community experiences as a co-lead for the UGA SNAP-Ed project, Healthy Childcare Georgia, where we aim to improve teacher self-efficacy to build healthy habits among young children. We also engage them in learning about My Plate and trying new fruits and vegetables, as well as growing them. It's been amazing to hear about children running home to ask their parents to buy and grow things like apples, kiwi, and broccoli. Our teachers have started growing gardens, modeling eating healthy vegetables, and one even wrote a grant to install a playground and a water fountain on the playground. Now at USDA, I have the privilege of promoting these wonderful programs, including Farm to School and our other tremendous assets, so we can help everyone in this country to thrive. And we count this network as one of our assets. Last week, I had the opportunity to meet with our Farm to School team, and my creative spirit was flowing as we discussed how to elevate the role this program has on advancing food and nutrition security and advancing racial equity within the Farm to School movement. As this group knows well, fostering local and regional food systems is fundamental to ensuring consistent and equitable access to healthy, safe, and affordable foods. And you'll hear me say that a lot because the definition of nutrition security really is promoting and making sure that everyone has access to healthy, safe, and affordable foods that optimize health and well-being. Some of my ideas include challenging each of you to make new and enhanced White House conference commitments. Some include finding ways to leverage this network so that we can do better together. Some include me lifting up all of the great work which you are doing, both individually and collectively. And some involve me just reaching out at events like today or directed calls with many of you to garner our input on the best path forward. So please join me in this journey. It's such an important time to advance food and nutrition security. While disparities in food insecurity and diet-related diseases were highlighted by COVID, this group knows well how these are long-standing problems that are associated with decades of structural inequities in education, employment, and housing, among other reasons. So, Over the last 2 years, the Biden-Harris administration has pushed all federal agencies to drive change through policies, practices, and programs, including maximizing our relationship with NFSN and implementing the Racial Equity Learning Lab. At USDA, we have been focusing our equity efforts on changes that would have the greatest potential for ensuring equitable access to healthy, safe, culturally appropriate, and affordable foods. This work includes establishing the first USDA Equity Commission and having each of our agencies across the department to develop equity plans. We are also working to build our awareness among staff and key partners about the sizable body of research indicating that structural racism harms health in ways that can be described, measured, and dismantled. In addition, we are carefully examining our existing and potential policies to identify ways to prioritize health equity and to address the social determinants of health. This is where nutrition security comes in and where we at USDA and each of you here today can have influence. So many of you in this room are trusted messengers that can elevate the power of our programs and take and transform them into your communities and beyond. At the core of our approach to advance food and nutrition security is the administration of more than 16 nutrition assistance programs, which reach 1 in 4 Americans. And we can reach more. These programs are the most far-reaching, powerful tools available to the federal government to ensure that everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background, has access to healthy, safe, culturally appropriate, and affordable food. Besides elevating the importance of nutrition assistance, we are working hard to highlight the department's role in improving what people eat for all demographic groups and life stages. Poor nutrition is the leading cause of illness in this country and responsible for more than 600,000 deaths per year. Beyond poor health outcomes, poor nutrition is also associated with decreased academic achievement and increased financial stress. And this is all preventable, and each of us can play a role to help improve the health of this nation. At USDA, we are using this 4-pillar approach illustrated here to advance food and nutrition security and hopefully the health of everyone in this country. The approach includes focusing on providing meaningful nutrition support throughout all stages of life, as we did with the reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan to bring SNAP benefits more in line with the cost of healthy eating. We are also connecting in our country to healthy, safe, everyone in our country to healthy, safe, affordable food sources through programs like the Gus Shoemaker Nutrition Incentive Program, which increases access to fresh fruits and vegetables for individuals with low income. And this group knows well, developing, translating, and enacting nutrition science through partnerships like the My Plate National Strategic Partnership is so important to our work. Lastly, we want to integrate this all through our work, all the things that I've mentioned, and we are prioritizing equity every step of the way, which we can see in initiatives like those to improve tribal food sovereignty across the country. Across each of these pillars, I encourage each of us to think about new and enhanced ways to improve this unique partnership and how we can advance food and nutrition security so we can maximize our collective potential to improve the health of the nation. So what can we do here today through this unique network that will set us up for success to advance food and nutrition security in the long term? One is celebrating and leaning in to the power of this network and the Farm to School movement. Today and in the coming weeks and months, I look forward to working with each of you on how I can help elevate the role of this network and how this program may help in advancing food and nutrition security. I also look forward to discussing where we can do more to accelerate progress on the White House conference goals. Please don't be shy about emailing me and reaching out to me about your thoughts on how we can do better together. My email is simply my name, Kari.Cartwright@USDA.edu. usda.gov. Your voices matter. I look forward to hearing from you. And in closing, I enjoyed so much serving on this network's advisory council, and I am thrilled to now be in this position to maximize its impact. Thank you so much for all the work you do, for the way that you serve, for the passion that you serve with, and please keep it up. Now I will stop and take a few questions. Thank you. Any question? I thought I saw Joshua's hand, but maybe that was a hand clap. Was that an applause? Okay, Joshua said that was an applause. And I'm looking in the chat, so if anybody has any questions, I am happy to pause and answer. And just thank you. Hello to so many people. Hi, Jessica. I'm seeing some more people up here that I didn't see before. No questions? I'm so excited. You guys, I love you guys. I just love Farm to School. This is the greatest network ever. So I won't belabor time. If there aren't any, okay, I see one from Jamise. What are the greatest challenges USDA is facing in operationalizing equity? Let's see, I won't frame that in terms, I'll call it, Jamise, a welcome opportunity. And I think one of the best things that we can do is to continue to get the word out about nutrition security, because it is a shift, right? In terms of thinking about moving from food insecurity and making sure that people are food secure, that they're not experiencing food insecurity, to moving toward nutrition security. And so we are really being concerned about the food that is healthy, safe, and affordable, and it's for optimal health and well-being. So one of the things that I think about in terms of getting the word out is using and leveraging our partnerships. We can't do the work alone. And so people like this network, I have visited so many people. Like just yesterday, I came back from the My Plate National Strategic Partnership. We want to make My Plate a national brand, a household brand. So you got to help me with that, because we got to make sure that people can recognize My Plate instead of the pyramid. You know, we got to move that forward. But so many ways we need to work in partnership, and we need ideas from the community and wonderful models like the models that the National Farm to School Network uses to leverage our collective power. And so I won't necessarily call that a challenge, but I'll say that if we can work together, that we can do much more, and we can get the word out, and we can achieve our goals. And at USDA, we want everyone that is eligible to be signed up for our programs, and we want everyone to have access to healthy, safe, and affordable food. And I know that's a lofty goal. And I was talking to Sheila earlier this morning. I said, you know, one of the White House goals is to end hunger. That's a bold goal, right? And so, but if we're all going to be working at it together, someone came up to me at the meeting yesterday and said, you know what, we've been talking about getting folks to eat healthy for a long time, and I think now's the time. So I know with people like NFSN, I can get this done, and we can get it done collectively. And I just, again, thank you for the opportunity to come and to speak to everyone. And I'm seeing another question in the chat. So thank you for that, Jamise. I see one, sorry, my chat's going fast, so I might need some help. Let's see. Oh, Jamise did snap in My Plate. Yay. How has USDA addressed the challenges around making food culturally appropriate food available and accessible? Thank you for your question, Yusef. One of the things that we've done, again, I was just referring to My Plate, is to really make sure that people know that My Plate is a symbol, but it should be adapted for culturally appropriate foods, right? And so to know that your plate is your plate, and it's a symbol, but the cultural foods that are representative of your culture, that are tasty, that are healthy, should be a part of the plate. And so one of the efforts that we've done with My Plate with some of our strategic partners is to adapt and make My Plate more culturally appropriate. The symbol and its resources are available in 22 languages. And we have also had partners come together to produce Mi Plato, which has a lot of resources that have have been translated into Spanish. And Goya, who is one of our strategic partners, has many, many resources. I'm just telling you this because I heard a wonderful presentation from them yesterday on adapting recipes, making them culturally appropriate, and then also just serving as a model to other industry partners. And so we are working across lines. We have lots of people who are committed to this effort. And so we are working in those manners. So thank you so much for that question, Yusuf. And do we have time for one more question? You stop me, Tricia. If not, I'm just going down the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. Yes, we do have one more question, time for one more question.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I see two.
Can I ask a question verbally?
You may, Miles.
Yeah, appreciate you. I manage a school garden, and one of our real hurdles is competing with the price point of conventional growers, and we do offer food to our cafeteria from our garden on campus, but one of the projects I'm working on is sourcing from local growers, and one of the blocking points is just simply the price point, and I wonder if you have any insight into how to compete with local with conventional pricing with U.S. Foods and Shamrock Foods or wherever you are regionally with your wholesale supplier.
That's a wonderful question, Miles. And I know, we've done a lot and we know that food costs have increased. And so as I talked about with the Thrifty Plan, aligning that, it took a lot of effort to align that with the cost of eating healthy. And so again, I think through creative partnerships and strategic partnerships that we have to help and incentivize ways to help folks to get access to healthy food. And so we're doing that in several ways, but I think we have to have public-private partnerships. And in getting that, a lot of times people, even yesterday, were telling me about how they would start the programs, but then they can't sustain them. So how do we get that? And we have the Food is Medicine efforts and getting fresh food out to folks. So how do we come up with creative solutions to overcoming those barriers? So I think that gives me a lot of food for thought, Miles, and we'll have to really think collectively. I don't have the sole answer to that, but I definitely think that there are ways that we can solve it through partnerships. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miles, for your question. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Corey Cartwright. We really appreciate all the remarks and sharing your initiatives at the USDA. We are actually taking notes of the questions that are coming in, so we will make sure to follow up on those and we'll share it with the USDA. But at this time, I'm going to move us along to the next part of our agenda, which is telling you about the Racial Equity Learning Lab and what it is.
Thank you.
Go ahead and thank you so much. Give me a moment here. So why we're here today is to talk about and let you all know about the Racial Equity Learning Lab. The Racial Equity Learning Lab, as you know, is a cooperative agreement between the National Farm to School Network, our organization, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Community Food Systems Division. We heard from our colleagues at the USDA about their plans for equity and initiatives around equity and centering equity in the food system work. And this Racial Equity Learning Lab experience is a virtual learning space that fosters a cross-race dialogue between 13 participants focused on farm to school and using a curriculum guide we're calling the Lab Roadmap. Cohort members are invited to bring in their lived experience. That's something that we really want to center in this virtual learning space. And folks can bring in equity-centered projects, operations, program planning, and other issues that they're working on focused on equity in the farm to school space. And the goal is for us to co-create and co-learn together. The lab is meant to be iterative and collaborative. Those are the two underpinning theories of the Racial Equity Learning Lab. And Elena Paisano is going to talk a little bit about what that really entails and how we use value-based community agreements like dynamic governance as a method of collaborating and co-learning in a virtual space like the Racial Equity Learning Lab. So I'm going to pass it on to Elena. Talk about co-learning and co-creation.
Thank you, Trisha. Good morning, everyone. Gowatsi. My name's Elena Paisano. As Trisha said, I am an enrolled citizen of the San Carlos Apache Nation belonging to the Yellow People Clan, as well as adopted Water Clan and Little Sun Clan here in Laguna Pueblo, in case I have any relatives out there. And much gratitude to you, Dr. Cartwright, for just that amazing kickoff and grounding and why we're doing this work, right? And so I'm really excited to be here as the equity consultant to help guide a process that we think is frankly kind of radical. We are suggesting that we start to talk and learn about equity in a way that is actually how it emerges in our real life, right? It's applicable. It's not academic. There's so many amazing academic resources out there, and many of us have been privileged enough to do some of that learning. But what we came into this project knowing is that folks come with their own positionality, right? We all have our own lived experience that informs where we are in our own equity journey. And sometimes when you come into these spaces of co-learning around things such as structural racism and equity, you're asked to set that aside. And so this is a space where we don't want you to set that aside. We want you to bring that all in with you. And so we have created a roadmap and a curricula, as well as kind of just a way of being that really focuses on an emergent process. And what we mean by that is it is going to be non-linear, right? So there's not a start and an end to any sort of learning, especially when it comes to how we hold relationship with other people. And so we have done our best to have a very robust curriculum that also allows for things that are real time that come in, things that are appropriate to place and context and moment. This is a 3-year initiative. Right? Times change a lot. Different issues come up that impact our communities, and we want to be able to be not only culturally responsive, but responsive to the timeliness of the things that we're facing in our communities across the country. In that same way, back to the nonlinear process, we also want people to be able to step in different spaces of their learning. So I'll just offer an example. So I am, really privileged to come from a tribal nation. And so I have a lot of understanding around sovereignty and land and those policy issues. I don't have as much understanding as access to maybe resources and water and urban development issues that impact people's lives and our food production. And so I might be at a beginning stage around those pieces, but at what we would call sort of an advanced stage around others. And so we want people to be able to come in with their own lived experience and be able to activate with others. We also know that our hope is that it ripples out. So you might be wondering, 13 people, that's not very many people. So we chose 13 people for a couple of reasons. It is designed to be collaborative. And for those of you that do a lot of facilitation, it's pretty hard to manage a room more than 13 big personalities and lived experiences. So we wanted to preserve the intimacy of that and make sure that for the folks involved in the cohort, it is a meaningful use of time because it is a commitment. It also allows us to be able to make decisions, as Trisha alluded to, in a way that dismantles the hierarchy that we so often come together, right? So moving away from a model based in democracy, where we all put our voice in, but some of us leave feeling invisible, right? If you weren't in the majority rule there, you might feel further disenfranchised. So this process is actually more consent-based and comes around acceptance and negotiation and relationship. We also are upholding a process of developing community agreements, which aren't new, right? We all have experience in that space. But in this unique space, we really want to make sure that those address not only agreements for how we show up, so operational and structural, but how we hold each other in good relationship, and realizing that that is defined as more than just a standard for how to arrive, but really how to create a community culture that is accepting and that is full of gratitude and patience for each other. We also are committed, as part of that nonlinear process, we know diverse outcomes are valuable and valid, and we want to steer people towards that. We don't expect every individual to come into this process and walk away at the same point. We have determined some outcomes that we want to see in terms of growth or benchmarks, but we realize that that's going to look really different depending on who's involved. and that it's community grounded. As Trisha mentioned, our goal is for people to bring in, I would even say almost your baggage, right? Bring it with you and let's unpack it together and talk about it. And we'll do that in small groups. We'll do that in big groups. We'll do that in visual ways. It's all about having multiple approaches for learning and for processing in group and individual settings. So I think that's all I want to share for now. And I know there will be plenty of questions and space for questions at the end. So please bring those. And Trisha, if there's anything else you want me to touch on, let me know. But I'm just going to say I'm really excited. I feel like this is going to be a unique space, and we are excited to see so many people interested in joining us on this journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. And now I think I'm going to pass it on to our advisory council, starting with Tess and Josh, to talk a little bit about the Racial Equity Learning Lab collaborative design and the lab roadmap.
Hi, folks. It's such an honor to be here working with this team. Both the NFSN team and the advisory council has just been fabulous. And I'm so excited that so many folks are here and interested. So putting all of those things that Elena was talking about into place, like the structure that we actually came up with was, again, we were really trying to come up with something that was nonlinear, recognizing that through the learning lab, you're going to do 7 modules in a row, right? It's linear, but we wanted to create something that would really work in that structure sequentially for that time that we're together, and be a tool later that you could enter from any angle that you needed, depending on where you were. Again, everything about the way that we've tried to think through this is about your lived experience and how we really do this learning together. So we came up with a structure that was based on seasons. Again, thinking through something that would really be familiar and recognizable to all of us in terms of like what this work and learning feels like in our bodies, right? Our just daily lived experience and how it shows up for us in, as Elena said, in our various positionalities and perspectives. And that's the beauty of it. That's the power of it, is bringing those things and letting us work together based on things like our shared stories. So they're going to be prompts that really center the work that you're doing, the challenges that you're experiencing. And those will come in themes. So the modules will have themes. We've got winter, which is really looking at reflection and history, spring, which is really looking at foundations, planning, that imagining, all of those head things. Summer, actions, approaches, collaborations. Fall, heart, literally reaping, right? Reaping, harvest, journeying, celebrating together, and kind of a whole picture of the whole year, really looking at healing and sustainability, how our positionality and intersectionality of all of the issues that we're looking at bring us together into how we move this learning forward. But these different pieces, again, we'll go through them sequentially in the learning lab, but later this is still a tool for you so that you're having a challenge around collaborations. You can move into the summer module and it's got resources and questions and things that you can dig into and continue, because this isn't a start-finish journey, right? This is cyclical. This is cyclical. And we continue learning in this frame of cultural humility and bring our whole selves to it repeatedly and do this work together. And I think I'm going to hold it there. And Josh is going to talk to you a little bit about what a particular session looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Tess. Like Tess mentioned, the way we structured this racial equity lab was really moving away kind of from the traditional train the trainer, where you come in and you're just downloaded with information, videos, readings, all those things, and that we really wanted to center the individuals that are in this room. And so I think what's really unique about this is that, yes, we have all these structures built in, we have these themes built in, but there'll be a lot of opportunities that and autonomy for lab participants to make choice of like how they want this experience to be. And so let's go over it quick. Folks must be wondering, okay, these all sound great. Like, what does this look like in reality? And so obviously this will be virtual. We'll have 7 sessions that will be virtual, with the exception. And so again, for us, really thinking about how can we engage in all the different ways. Some folks might be more comfortable speaking out loud, where other folks might be more comfortable using chat and using other ways to engage. And so examples of that. And so an example of a structure or of a session would be the pre-work, aka it is not homework. It is ways for you to engage and really kind of dig in deeper to your own personal work and how you can bring that into that space. And so House Space is just an online digital space that we're going to be housing a lot of our resources. It's a way you can engage with other lab members, engage with resources. So it's just kind of like a living Google Drive in some way, if that's easier to understand. And then within that, each session will have different ways to engage, including journaling sessions that really kind of reflect on your own personal experiences. We'll also have videos, articles, and podcasts that we chose that are specifically catered towards each theme in each session. And you have the ability to choose one or the other, or you can do all of them. Again, we understand everyone is busy and have other commitments in life. And so we also recognize that this is not homework per se, that we're trying to bog you down on work, but really kind of a space for you to reflect and how you can prepare yourself for a session. So in an actual session, similar to what Elena was saying, is that we will have a lot of opportunities for big group facilitated discussion, but also small groups. So for example, one of the sessions, the first thing you'll be doing, is going into breakout rooms to talk about what did you journal. And so these are examples of ways that you can engage with what you're currently doing and kind of sharing with other folks, as we really want to center that piece of how can we learn from each other, and that we all bring different strengths into this space, and how can we not just learn from quote unquote the facilitators, but everyone here are teachers and educators and can share and bring value to this group in different ways. And other ways for engagement in a session will look like digital whiteboard. So if folks are familiar with Jamboard or Mirrorboard, these are another great tool where it's almost like you're in person and you're putting a sticky note on there, or you're drawing things, or you're articulating things. So these are other ways that we love to engage other folks in these sessions. And then going back to that piece of feedback, reflection, and reiteration, that these sessions really will change based on how the group wants to shape this. And going back to that piece of like dynamic governance and community agreements, that really built into this is the opportunities for folks to take control and to co-create and collaborate in an intentional way, that it's not just one person decides, but the group decides as a whole. And then obviously supplemental resources, going back to House Space, we'll definitely have additional resources if folks want to really dig in deeper in different sections, whether you're doing farm to school from the producer sides, or you're a teacher or instructor at a school garden. And so I think there'll be a lot of different resources that you can dig in deeper in your own time. And so that's kind of a little bit of the structure of the session, and I'll pass it off to the next lab advisory council member.
I think that's me, Trisha, right?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. I think also Mark Beckeru wasn't able to join us, but him and I were tapped to help spearhead the development of racial equity-based resources. And this is to like tangible printed materials that help support the cohort members in different ways, I suppose. And I think, for example, one of them would be to help communicate the work that you'll be doing, like the cohort members throughout this journey with their own colleagues, with their community, with the people they engage in. So guides on ways to do that. So there's going to be a community advocacy process sort of support. Another example is sort of, I think, the approach that NFSSN does is the asset-based and strength-based approach. So, there will be some support with community asset mapping, as well as a stakeholder power mapping process will be included. And, the things that were mentioned earlier on value-based community agreements and things like that, these will all be things that folks can take away with them to share, to use, in their community, in their spaces, in the work that they do in Farm to School, as well as I think a equity language guide that will help sort of, again, talk about that framing of asset-based communities. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Yusuf and Jamis. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Tina.
you, Tina. Go ahead, Yusuf.
Yeah, so Jamis and I had worked on developing resources around centering equity and participation and making sure that that was a key part of this process. And we believe that a key part of centering equity in participation is to develop group trust and an ability to communicate with each other, especially if any conflict arises. So part of that is providing folks with an opportunity to practice being comfortable with the uncomfortable, as that's part of a growth process, especially when discussing things around equity and trying to be able to communicate in a way that's very participatory. So part of that's going to be initially developing community agreements in the first session and discussing mechanisms for managing conflict if it occurs in the lab or any cohort meetings and discussions. And our goal is that this framework isn't only operational, but it's also about creating community and culture and clear lines of communication where folks are able to share their truths and perspectives and lived experiences in an honest way. And we think that is key in aligning with the lab's intentions of co-learning and co-creation, which we discussed a little earlier. And we also wanted these concepts to be centered in the application process, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in the coming slides here. So that was just a little bit of my perspectives. And Jamis, would you like to share?
Yeah, thank you, Yusuf. I think this was a really important point for us because often we don't intentionally design understanding that conflict will happen, right? And then it happens and we're kind of caught off guard and we don't know how to tend to it. So, really thinking about how we can be proactive, how we can be intentional, how we can be thoughtful to both normalize conflict and recognize that it probably will occur, especially because we're bringing together such a diverse group of people from across the nation to work on this project. We're going to be working across difference, right? And really equipping and giving folks an opportunity to practice moving through and transforming through conflict. So I really appreciated the fact that we did this. I think it's a really unique feature of the lab and something that I would love to see folks doing more of. Also, I think Elena talked a lot about some of the really sort of important approaches that are being used in the lab, thinking about it being emergent, collaborative, moving away from linear to nonlinear and iterative processes, being grounded in community, thinking about not being set on specific defined outcomes, but being open to what unfolds with bringing together this incredible group. And just really being culturally responsive. When we were thinking about the participation framework, we used design thinking and we asked other members of the advisory council to think about, well, what do we want the participants' experience to be like, right? And we heard things like, we want there to be a sense of belonging. We want to center joy and connection. We want to be able to center those who are directly impacted by inequities in the food system and really lift up and respond to lived experience and value it, right? And actively address racism and other forms of oppression. And then we also really wanted to think about what barriers might participants encounter that would stand in the way of having those experiences. So really wanting to recognize and tend to power dynamics, understanding that this will be virtual, remote. And so that brings up a whole set of challenges that we, again, need to proactively design for. And recognizing also that neurodivergence, you know, and different ways of being and showing up and learning, and making sure that we are actively addressing and creating different ways of connecting with one another in the material to create an environment where everyone, no matter who they are and how they're showing up, can really connect with the group and the material. And then also, as a part of that design thinking, we really thought about what is the infrastructure that we need to create that experience. Moving at the speed of trust, being able to really give time to relationship and trust building, making sure that we're not setting things up to be transactional, but rather relational, really focusing and centering on relationships. And at the very beginning, taking that time to build consensus around shared agreements for how we will show up, how we will interact with one another and with within the community. So yeah, I just want to thank all of the advisory council members and NFSN for this experience. It's been really powerful, and I'm so excited to see applications come in and see this incredible learning lab launch, and really excited to see what comes out of it. So thank you.
I'm gonna jump in there right after you, Janice. Before we hand it back to Trisha, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Trisha holding that space for all the advisory council. For how many weeks did we do this, or how many months, or how many sessions? Many. So all this collaborative work. So again, thank you so much, Trisha, for hosting all that and the collaborative work that the whole council had to create what we created for your potential cohort members. And I think next application, because everyone's excited to know how they can apply.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. And thank you for the advisory council members. I honestly felt like we had our meetings on Fridays, but it felt like we were hanging out, learning from one another. I'm so grateful for all the learnings. It was an incredible experience. I feel like I definitely created new communities. It was really amazing getting to know everyone. And I hope this isn't the end. We can continue to collaborate and talk about centering equity in the farm to school movement. So now in the next maybe 10 minutes, I'm gonna segue into the theoretical underpinnings of the Racial Equity Learning Lab to a little bit more logistical, so stay with me. So who should join the cohort? As you remember from earlier, we talked about our call to action and our positionality as the National Farm to School Network in this space. We have a vision for a racially just food system for all and aim to work towards this vision through farm to school. So with that, we really would like to invite anyone working in the farm to school space to join the lab cohort. This is something that we are hoping to continue to adjust in future iterations, especially for the next cohort. But some of the examples, and not limited to folks who are food producers, growers, farmers, farm to school coordinators, instructors, educators, like Josh was saying, from school and district settings, food service members, early care education settings. So anyone who's integrating food and nutrition in the school space. We would also like to ensure that there's diversity in organizational affiliation, so it's cross-sector. We would like representatives not only from nonprofit organizations and state and federal agencies, but local schools, local communities and agencies, again, early childhood education sites, agricultural business, farmers, ranchers, just to name a few. And we understand that applying a racial equity lens in this food system work is a journey. I really love how Tess framed that, that there's not an end to this work. And we really want to make sure that as we are crafting this group of 13 folks together, that we are centering lived experiences. And just as a reminder, because I feel like we've been hanging out for quite some time, we will have an optional Q&A session. So if any questions are coming up to you for, regarding like the theories behind the Racial Equity Learning Lab or anything logistical, please hold on to your question, and we will have an optional breakout session at the end as well. So you will see a two-step application process. And the reason for that is because in our planning and our discussions, the many discussions we've had with the advisory council and internally at NFSN, we found ourselves listing a bunch of questions because we really want to get to know our potential cohort members. But at the same time, we wanted to be mindful of the time it takes for folks to really complete the application. So there are a lot of things that we really wanted to know about the potential cohort member, and our hope is to be mindful about the time it takes for folks to do that. So we are going to be first releasing an interest form, which my colleague Ji-Yoon will be dropping in the chat. And this is an interest form. We tend to really focus on the demographic questions, one, to ensure that we're reaching the diverse communities that we've described and intended to reach and make up the cohorts, and two, build in an extra layer for opportunity in the interest form to share their capacity, to join the virtual sessions, and also commit for applying a racial equity lens in their farm to school work. The interest form will also include a question about how they would like to submit a secondary application. So folks can choose whether they can choose whether to submit their secondary application should they be selected via writing or sending a video response or simply having a conversation. We will then, we, NFSN, and perhaps some of the advisory council members will review the interest form responses and select through the received responses and get it closer to a group of 13, which is not a lot, I understand. But we will then invite semi-final candidates to then submit the secondary application, which asks more in-depth questions about their interest and commitment to embedding racial equity in their work within the farm to school and motivation to collaborate, because as you know, this is going to be a collaborative co-learning space. And just to kind of go through the timeline, the interest form is going to be due June 30th. We will then review the applications from the interest forms and commit to sending out an invite to folks for secondary applications by July 14. And then secondary applications are going to be due August 4. And again, that's going to be more of the application where folks can tell us a little bit about their work, their commitment in farm to school and in centering racial equity. And then NFSN will make the announcement of the final cohort of 13. Our commitment due date is August 14. And we're hoping to have our first day of the sessions on September 8th. So I know that's a lot, so I'm going to take a moment here if you need to take a breath. But there, for the lab cohort member commitment, in terms of the time commitment, we're estimating that the lab cohort members will commit to about 4 hours per month for 6 months for the virtual engagement piece. Again, starting in September. For the September session, there will be 2 sessions because we're going to have like a get to know welcome session that's going to be on the 8th through February of next year. That's assuming that there aren't any changes to the dates, but we will make sure to work with the cohort of 13 to make sure we're catering to any needs that could come up if we need to reschedule some of the meetings. This breaks down to an estimated, the Zoom sessions will be about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. And as Josh and Tess described, there will be not homework, but a prep time, maybe 30 to 60 minutes to dive into the resources, the podcast, audio, whatever it may be, or also to connect with our equity consultant, Elena, to have a more kind of a dynamic conversation about centering equity in your work. And something that I'm really excited to announce is that we are going to have 1 full day in-person session, which is going to be a retreat style meeting. And we're looking to have it on November 15, 2003. in New Orleans. We're still coordinating the initial stages. I wanted to also give a shout out to Susan Schempf, who's giving us some recommendations for New Orleans venues. So that's still kind of to be determined, but wanted to flag that for you all in case that's something that will be important for you to know before submitting an application or an interest form. And finally, but most importantly, cohort members will also receive $3,500 at the beginning of their commitment to joining the lab. Now, some of this amount or stipend will be used towards traveling expenses to the in-person meeting, which will be held in New Orleans. We will also, we put together an FAQ document and I believe Jiyun can share that in the chat as well, which includes all of the other logistical information regarding becoming a lab cohort member. But with all of that in mind and thinking about how the first two cohorts, the first cohort will just have 13 people and the second cohort will also have 13, which is not a lot. There are many other ways to stay involved in this movement. One is if you're not an NFSN partner organization yet, please sign up. We will be sharing the link to join our network in a moment. And also, if you're kind of looking at these materials and from what you've listened to throughout this past hour, and you're thinking of someone in your community or someone in your workspace who would be really good to join the lab, please share the opportunity with them. Share this opportunity with your networks. And also, if you don't have the capacity to join the first cohort of 13, please also consider applying for the next cohort, which will begin in the fall of 2024. I'm going back in time. And then stay tuned for our lab public training. So same time next year, around this time next year and in 2025, we'll be holding another public webinar, which right now, this focus of this public webinar is more like, what is Racial Equity Learning Lab? What are the theories behind it? Who are the collaborators involved? But in the upcoming two public webinars, we're really hoping to highlight the lab experience from the perspective of the lab cohorts themselves, sharing resources, key learnings in that space, and hoping that those two webinars will be a little bit more interactive than the one that we're experiencing now. But yeah, so we're really looking forward to that. The other is NFSN living room sessions. Those are an opportunity for partners at NFSN to connect with staff and also to learn a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're currently doing. But we can certainly dedicate a topic about centering equity in farm to school. An example can be how can we center equity in our evaluation, for instance, because that's something that we certainly talked about as part of the advisory council, is like keeping in mind equity-centered evaluation practices and data collection. So that's another opportunity for us to stay connected. And then we also want to highlight our opportunity to share your stories. So if you have equity-centered projects or stories that you're working on, we would be happy to feature them in our blog or social media. And that's another way we can kind of connect and collaborate. And then wanted to flag that we are going to have a national farm to cafeteria conference in 2025. So that's another exciting piece to keep in mind. And then last but not least on this list, this is an idea from Jamis, actually from the advisory council, is perhaps exploring ways to replicate the concept of the lab, but maybe making it a regional concept and by collaborating with regional based organizations. And if you have any other suggestions in terms of how else can we stay involved and how else can we connect about centering equity in farm to school, please email me. I've shared my email here at trisha@farmtoschool.org. Well, thank you all again so much for joining us. We have about 15 minutes left, and we were hoping to dedicate some of that, if not maybe a little bit over, for optional Q&A session. But this concludes the informational part of our webinar. And please stay tuned and stick around if you would like to have your questions answered or have some discussion. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick moment here to pause